In this episode of 5 Minutes of Cloud, we're going to talk about storage in the perspective of cloud as a service, and specifically storage as yet another one of the core infrastructure as a service services. When we talk about storage, we're actually talking about potentially a whole set of different technologies. In one case, storage is just that which lets us support putting bits, the data that we're storing, onto some form of media, be that a spinning disk or tape, or more likely today, solid state disk. But storage also talks about a set of other technologies, specifically the capabilities like object storage, which are really network-attached file systems, different ways of managing and manipulating the sort of the construct of a file within the cloud system space. And again, much like any other cloud service, we're talking about things that can be managed and manipulated on demand through some form of self-service access and are normally network accessible. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's an IP address associated with the storage target, although in the object storage case, that's usually the situation, but that we have a way of establishing connectivity between wherever our storage happens to be and wherever our service that wants to consume that storage happens to be. At one level, we talk about sort of the lowest layer of storage, the bare metal storage. This is the storage that usually gets associated very closely with some form of compute instance or compute service. So for example, a physical bare metal server or a virtual machine that's been deployed through the cloud services model often needs some form of disk to support an operating system to be written against, often coming from an image management system out of the compute environment. So that's the bare metal instance. And there are even environments where it is actually a bare metal disk that gets mapped to as a part of a bare metal server. So it's basically that whole complex tied together. More commonly today, though, we're seeing virtualization at least at a base level being the principal compute component, and virtual storage then being the principal compute access component. Whether that be a distributed file system like Ceph, which is really popular in the OpenStack services space, or something like the network file system, which is now I would say almost old school storage system, but a distributed network attached storage environment as well, providing the backing storage for operating systems, for the container models within the compute system space as well. So there's that sort of base block storage or base file system on block storage kind of systems model that's a core cloud and environment and service. We can then start to step higher, a slightly higher level, into a slightly more abstracted environment. And here we're looking at things like object storage, which is a file system kind of a model. I have a bunch of objects. Those objects are files, is another way of thinking of them. But rather than being attached to an operating system directly, they're attached to a service that provides access to them via usually a web interface. Now, there are object storage systems that actually still do require direct connectivity into an operating system, but the one that seems to be most interesting, or at least the model that is most interesting in the cloud services space, is object storage as a web service. So in a sense, a storage component that looks a lot like an infrastructure storage component, but it's actually starting to move into the platform services space. So object storage is one such system. We're certainly seeing a resurgence of network file services, so NFS services, or network attached file services as cloud storage options as well. And many of these distributed file systems, object storage, network file system services are all part of that overall cloud systems and service space, providing a different way of thinking about how you access the disk and the backing store for your services. We could take this to one more level of abstraction as well. So for the most part, we've been talking about file systems, files, or operating system backing disks. So basically the thing that an operating system is going to write its system state onto, or potentially its own files onto. But you could take it one level further and say that even a service like a database, which is going to store data onto a disk, or just store it in memory even, you could say that that memory and that database are also storage services that are part of the cloud environment, especially if I have a way of provisioning that storage, the database storage in this case, on demand through a self-service interface. Now, this really pushes us into the platform space more than it does the infrastructure services space, but you can see there is sort of a gray area here. They're all storage models. They're all network accessible in some fashion, at least at the virtualization space. They're going to be attachable through some kind of a network services mechanism. And they enable the storage functionality that is needed as a part of our data center system model, which is the infrastructure as a services environment. So we've talked about block storage as a core component. So this is the effectively in the past we would think of it as spinning disk, more often solid state disk now, as a service model, or the equivalent of that block storage as a virtualized storage entity has to be attached to an operating system. We've also talked about virtualized file systems, so either distributed file systems or things like that, the network file system, NFS, as services that are available through a cloud-based environment. And then the sort of the biggest shift for the cloud system space, of course, is the object storage model, which really ties into more application service, but also can provide a backend for a number of different infrastructure services, like providing backup targets and things of that nature, that it's actually fairly well suited for. So we have all these different storage components, and they provide another one of the core services in the infrastructure as a service space. Thanks for watching. This was Robert Starmer bringing you 5 Minutes of Cloud. 5 Minutes of Cloud is brought to you by Kumulus Technologies, the company I actually work for, and we really appreciate the fact that you actually attended and watched this little segment. We obviously have a YouTube channel here, so please subscribe to that. We have Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. Yeah, I do actually find some interesting things to say on Twitter once in a while. And on top of that, we have a mailing list. If you subscribe to the mailing list, we have a free report, basically 5 pitfalls of cloud that you can avoid if you get my report. So why don't you hop on over to our website, sign up for the mailing list. You'll get that report delivered to your inbox shortly after signing up. And I think that's also another very interesting and important read. Thanks so much again for watching.